The auction took place on a grey London afternoon, in a house that had once belonged to the Vanes for 4 generations. Now it belonged to the creditors. Elinor Vane stood at the back of the grand hall, her hands folded at her waist, her spine straight as a tulip stem. She wore a gown of dark blue merino, well kept but 3 seasons out of fashion. Her mother had died the year before. Her father, a scholar of brilliant mind and disastrous habit, had died in the spring, leaving behind debts so vast they swallowed every acre, every painting, every book. And as the ton whispered with relish, his daughter. The auctioneer's gavel fell, the library sold, the silver sold. The ancestral portraits sold one after another, each lot a small death. Elinor did not weep. She had trained herself in the months of decline to keep her face as still as water under glass. But when the auctioneer announced the final item, the Vane collection, 2,000 rare volumes and manuscripts, the work of her father's lifetime, her chest tightened. The bidding began. A baron raised a card. A merchant countered. Then a voice from the shadows near the front, low and unhurried, spoke a sum so large the room faltered. £70,000. The auctioneer repeated the figure. The merchant lowered his card. The baron laughed, astonished. Elinor heard gasps around her. She did not turn. She knew that voice. It belonged to the Duke of Hartmore, a man she had not seen in 6 years, a man who moved through society like a rumor made of marble and restraint. He was the richest peer in the county, the coldest by reputation, and the last person on earth she had expected to save her father's books. Afterward, the solicitor found her in the small antechamber off the hall. Mr. Greaves had been her father's man for years. He looked as though he had swallowed a lemon. "Miss Vane," he said, "the Duke of Hartmore has settled the entire estate. All debts, all liens, but there is a condition." Elinor waited. She had learned that conditions were where the blade hid. "He wishes you to reside at Blackwood Hall for 1 year," the solicitor continued. "You are to catalogue the Vane collection in his library. It is his belief the task requires the family's knowledge. You will receive a stipend and full quarter." A stipend, not a marriage offer, not a charitable gift, a job. "And if I refuse?" Elinor asked. Mr. Greaves hesitated. "The collection would remain with the Duke regardless, but the pension he has arranged for the servants, the annuity for your father's old steward, those depend upon your acceptance." He was very clear. Elinor closed her eyes briefly. Of course he had been clear. The Duke of Hartmore never did anything without precision. He had bought her father's books, and with them, a year of her life. The ton would say he had bought her. They would not be entirely wrong. She opened her eyes. "Tell His Grace I accept his terms." That evening, as her trunks were packed and the house echoed with emptiness, Elinor stood at her bedroom window and watched the first rain fall on the London street. She was 24 years old. She had no family, no fortune, no illusions about what society thought of a woman in her position. But she had her name, and she had her mind, and she would not let the Duke of Hartmore see her bend. The door behind her opened. A footman entered with a letter on a silver tray. She recognized the seal, the Hartmore crest, a hawk with spread wings, talons empty. She broke the wax and read. "Miss Vane, a carriage will collect you at dawn. Pack lightly. Blackwood is not London. You will find the library cold and the company colder. You may still refuse. I will not ask again. Hartmore." Elinor read the letter twice. Then she walked to the fire and held the corner of the paper to the flame. It blackened, curled, and dissolved into ash. She did not watch it burn. She was too busy checking the contents of her portmanteau, the small leather case that held her mother's locket and the last letter her father ever wrote. Those things, at least, were hers. The rain fell harder. The house settled around her like a held breath. She would go to Blackwood Hall. She would do the work. She would not run, and she would not beg. If the Duke of Hartmore thought he had purchased a servant, he would learn that some debts are not paid in coin. But as the first hour of dawn approached and the carriage wheels splashed through the muddy streets, Elinor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She was leaving London as an obligation, a footnote in a ledger of credit and loss. The Duke had bought her father's legacy, and now he expected her to be grateful. Part 2. Blackwood Hall rose from the fog like a fortress built by men who had never known fear. Elinor saw it first through the carriage window, gray stone, narrow windows, a long drive flanked by bare oaks. It was not a welcoming house. It was a place that expected obedience. The housekeeper, Mrs. Thorne, met her at the door with a curtsy so shallow it was almost an insult. "Miss Vane," she said, "His Grace is away in London on parliamentary business. He left instructions that you are to have the East Suite and the use of the library from 8 until 4. Meals are served at 7, 12, and 6. If you need anything, you may ring for Mary." Elinor removed her bonnet and handed it to a silent maid. "I am not a guest, Mrs. Thorne. You need not pretend I am." Mrs. Thorne blinked. "I do not pretend, Miss Vane." "Then we shall deal well together," Elinor replied. The East Suite was comfortable but bare of ornament. A small fire had been lit. The windows overlooked a walled garden gone wild with neglect. Elinor unpacked her few belongings and sat on the edge of the bed. The house felt enormous and indifferent, a machine of stone and silence. At 8 the next morning, she entered the library. It was magnificent, 2 stories tall, with a gallery of dark wood and a ceiling painted in faded gold. The Vane collection filled the north wall, boxed and labeled in her father's hand. 2,000 volumes, a lifetime of scholarship. The air smelled of old paper and wax and the faint mineral cold of stone. On the reading table lay a letter. "Miss Vane, the catalogue is to be completed in the order my librarian has prescribed. You will find the ledgers in the 3rd drawer. You will not remove any volume from the house. You will not correspond with any outside party regarding the collection. Your predecessor found the work demanding. I trust you will not find it beyond your abilities. Hartmore." Elinor read the letter without expression. Then she opened the 3rd drawer, removed the first ledger, and began. For 2 weeks she worked from dawn until late afternoon. The catalogue was meticulous, almost punishing in its detail. She translated titles from Latin, Greek, and French, noting water damage and missing plates. She did not complain. She did not pause to weep over her father's handwriting, though she wanted to. She worked because work was the only thing left that did not pity her. In the 3rd week, she found the hidden ledger. It was tucked behind a row of folios on the highest shelf, bound in plain brown leather. She might have missed it, but the corner was worn as if handled often. She pulled it down, opened it, and found not a catalogue but a private account. Dates, sums, names. Her father's name appeared again and again. Loans, wagers, debts of honor, and beside each entry in the sharp, angular hand she now recognized as the Duke, a single notation, settled, H. The sums were vast. The earliest entries were dated 7 years before. The last was the sum she knew too well. £70,000. But it was the final entry that made her hands shake. Not a sum, a paragraph. The final settlement completes the obligation. The estate and all its contents pass to the Dukedom of Hartmore. The daughter of the debtor is to be offered residence and paid employ for the period of 1 year, renewable at the Duke's discretion. This is not a gift. It is the close of a shameful account. Elinor lowered the ledger. The room tilted slightly, then steadied. He had not purchased the collection to preserve it. He had purchased it to close a debt. His purchase of her year was not generosity but correction, a settling of accounts. She was not an archivist. She was a line item. That evening, she sent a note to Mrs. Thorne asking for an audience with the Duke upon his return. The housekeeper's eyes flickered with surprise, but she said only, "I will inform His Grace." The Duke returned to Blackwood 4 days later in the middle of the night. Elinor heard the carriage on the gravel, the low voices, the echoing of boots on stone. She sat up in bed, her heart beating a slow, furious rhythm. She did not sleep. At dawn she dressed with care, pinned her hair, and went downstairs to confront the man who had mistaken her for a debt. Part 3. The Duke of Hartmore was at breakfast in the small dining room, a room Elinor had been told was private. She ignored the instruction. She opened the door without knocking and stepped inside. He looked up from his newspaper. James Westcott, the 5th Duke of Hartmore, was not a handsome man in the conventional sense. His features were too severe, a jaw like cut granite, eyes the color of Winter River water, a mouth that rarely curved. But there was a gravity to him, a weight of presence that made the room shrink. He wore a black coat and an ivory cravat, and he did not stand when she entered. "Miss Vane," he said, "the custom is to request an audience." "The custom," she replied, "is also not to purchase a woman's year as if it were a parcel of land." He set down his newspaper, closed the door. She did not move. "I found the private ledger, the one that records every shilling my father owed you, the one that describes me as the close of a shameful account." His expression did not change. "Then you know the truth." "I know a version of it," she said. "I know I was never told the collection was collateral. I know I was brought here under a false pretense. I know the Ton believes you bought me for £70,000, and the ledger all but confirms it." The Duke rose slowly. He was tall, taller than she remembered, and he moved with the economy of a man who had learned to control every impulse. "Your father and mine were friends," he said. "Their friendship created obligations. When your father fell into difficulty, my father covered his losses. When my father died and I assumed the title, those obligations became mine. Your father continued to borrow. I continued to settle. The final sum was ruinous, but I paid it because it was owed, and because, Miss Vane, it ended the matter." "You paid it because you could," Elinor said, "and in doing so you made me your servant." For a long moment he simply looked at her. Then quietly he said, "I made you independent. You have a position, a stipend, a roof. That is more than most women in your circumstances can claim." "How generous," she said. "But do not dress the debt in charity. You purchased me because you could not bear to let my family's shame escape your control." The Duke's jaw tightened. "You speak of control as if it were a sin. It is the only thing that keeps Blackwood from collapse. My brother nearly destroyed this estate with his excesses before he died. My aunt has spent her widowhood trying to spend what remains. I inherited ruin, Miss Vane. Your father was one piece of that ruin, but he was not the only one. So if I am cold, it is because I have had to become so." Elinor heard the strain beneath his words, the faint cracking of a man who had carried too much for too long. She refused to soften. "Then we have both been shaped by the ruin of others," she said. "But I will not be treated as a line in your ledger. I will complete the catalogue because I owe my father's memory that much. But I will not pretend to be grateful for your charity. I will not curtsy to you as if you saved me. You did not save me, your grace. You settled me." She turned and walked out, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. That night, unable to sleep, Elinor returned to the library. A single lamp burned on the reading table. The Duke stood near the north wall, a volume open in his hands. He did not look up when she entered. "You are not the only one who cannot sleep," he said. She hesitated at the door. "I came for a book." "Then take one." She crossed the room, aware of his eyes following her, though he kept his head bowed. She selected a volume of Old English poetry, one her father had read to her as a child. As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "The ledger was my father, then mine. I did not create it, I only continued it. You think me a monster for closing an account. Perhaps I am. But I did not bring you here to humiliate you." "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. He closed the volume in his hands. "Because your father asked me to." Elinor froze. The book in her arms grew heavy as stone. Before he died, the Duke continued, he wrote to me. He asked that if the worst came, I would ensure you were not left to the mercy of strangers. He knew the debt would swallow everything. He asked me to be the one to catch you when it did. She stood very still. The lamp flickered. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows. Then you are not the villain I imagined, she said. But you are also not the savior my father hoped for. You are a man who honored a request and resented it. The Duke lifted his head. In the low light his eyes looked darker, less like ice than like deep water. I did not resent it, he said. I feared it. He walked past her and out of the library, leaving her alone with the smell of old paper and the sound of her own heart. Part 4. The hunting weekend arrived in a storm of carriages and velvet. Blackwood Hall filled with guests, earls, viscounts, a marquis and their wives, all eager to see the Duke's estate and the woman rumored to be his purchased archivist. Elinor kept to the library. She wore her plainest gown, a deep gray with white cuffs, and pinned her hair in a severe knot. She had no intention of joining the company, but the Duke sent a footman with a note in his angular hand. Your absence will be noted. Dine with us. H. It was not an invitation. It was a command. She dressed carefully, choosing her mother's pearl earbobs and a gown of dark green silk, the only truly fine garment she had left. When she entered the drawing-room before dinner, the conversation faltered for half a breath. Lady Caroline Wrexham, a widow of 26 with wheat-colored hair and eyes like polished brass, was the first to recover. She extended a gloved hand. Miss Vane, she said, her smile perfectly composed. How industrious of you to join us. I understand you have been cataloging the Duke's books. How fortunate for you that he keeps such a library. Though I suppose the collection was once your father's, was it not? The room listened. Elinor smiled with equal composure. It was, she said. My father dedicated his life to those books. It is an honor to ensure they are preserved. Lady Caroline tilted her head. Yes, I heard the Duke paid quite a sum for them. £70,000, was it not? And for you as well, they say, though surely not in the same transaction. A low ripple of laughter moved through the room. Elinor felt it like a cold draught, but her expression did not falter. I believe you have been misinformed, Lady Caroline, she said. The Duke purchased the collection. I was offered employment to catalogue it. There is a meaningful difference. Is there? Lady Caroline asked, her eyes bright with malice. Forgive me. The term seemed so very particular. A woman of your name living in the house of an unmarried duke, working for wages. One can only imagine what the ton will make of it. Elinor did not look away. The ton may make of it whatever they wish. I have no control over their imaginations. I have only my work and my word. Both are clean. The room had gone very quiet. At the far side of the drawing-room, the Duke stood with his back to the fire, watching. His face was unreadable, but his hand at his side had curled into a fist. Dinner was a long affair of whispered commentary and pointed looks. Elinor answered every question put to her with careful calm. She did not retreat. She did not excuse herself, though every nerve urged her to flee. When the ladies withdrew, she walked to the music room and stood by the window, watching the rain begin. The Duke appeared in the doorway. Miss Vane. She did not turn. Your Grace. He crossed the room slowly. Lady Caroline's remarks were beneath you, and beneath this house. I have heard worse, Elinor said. I will hear worse still. She is only the first to say it aloud. He stopped beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him despite the cold air. You should not have to bear it. Then why did you insist I attend? He was silent. The rain tapped against the glass. Somewhere in the house a clock struck 10. Because, he said at last, I wanted them to see that you are not hiding. She turned then, searching his face. In the dim light, he looked younger and less certain, as if the Duke of Hartmore had stepped briefly aside and left the man beneath. "And you wish them to see that I am not ashamed," she said. "No," he replied, "I wish them to see that I am not." Before she could answer, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Lady Caroline appeared in the doorway, her face tightening when she saw them. "There you are, Hartmore," she said, her voice smooth as cream. "We have all been wondering where you had vanished. Miss Vane. I trust you are not overtired. The library must be so very cold at night." The Duke turned. "Miss Vane's comfort is not your concern, Caroline." Lady Caroline's smile flickered. "No, I suppose it is yours." She left. The silence she left behind was louder than any words. Elinor stepped away from the window. "You should return to your guests." "They are not my guests," the Duke said quietly. "They are my obligations." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she left the music room and walked alone up the great staircase, feeling his gaze on her back like a hand between her shoulder blades. Part 5. The weeks that followed were quiet but charged, the air between them altered. The Duke did not apologize for Lady Caroline's cruelty, but he began to do something far more disconcerting. He began to change. He invited Elinor to join him for breakfast, then asked her opinion on a letter from his land agent. He walked with her through the walled garden, pointing out the overgrown roses, and asked what she would plant. He spoke to her of his brother, the late Duke, whose gambling and drinking had left the estates in ruin, of his aunt, whose bitterness was a weapon, of the burden of a title he had never wanted. And he listened. He listened when she spoke of her father's genius and his weakness for cards, of her mother's illness, of the long, slow unraveling of the Vane fortune. He did not interrupt. He did not offer empty comfort. He simply remained, a solid, silent presence until she had finished. One evening in late March, Elinor found a small box on the library table. Inside lay a silver quill, elegant and simple, with a note in the Duke's hand. "For the catalogue. You have earned better than the one you inherited." She stared at the quill for a long time. Then she put it away in her desk and did not mention it. But that night she dreamed of him. The dream was not improper. It was only the two of them walking through the walled garden, the air warm with the first breath of spring. He was speaking of the tenants, his voice low and tired, and she reached out and touched his sleeve. He stopped. He looked at her, and the dream dissolved into light. She woke with her heart beating hard and sat up in bed, pressing a hand to her chest. This was not part of the bargain. The next morning, she discovered the letters. She was searching for a missing volume in a chest at the back of the library when she found a bundle of correspondence bound with black ribbon. The hand was her father's. The dates were from 6 years before, and the recipient was not the Duke. It was the previous Duke of Hartmore. She read them slowly, her fingers cold on the yellowed paper. Her father wrote of a proposed alliance between the two families, a marriage between his daughter and the Duke's younger son. It had been arranged quietly in the old way, without the knowledge of the young people involved. But then the betrothal had been broken, abruptly, by her father. "I cannot sacrifice my daughter to a family whose name is built on debt and silence," her father wrote. "Your son is a cold man, and my daughter deserves a warm hearth, not a gilded cage. I release her from the obligation. I will repay the sums advanced if it takes my life." Elinor lowered the letter. She had been meant to marry James Westcott, the man who had bought her for £70,000, the man whose house she now lived in, whose books she now catalogued, whose presence she now felt in every room. He had known. Of course he had known. Her father had broken the engagement, and the Duke had inherited not only the debt but the insult. The door opened. She looked up. The Duke stood in the doorway, his eyes going at once to the letters in her hand. For one unguarded moment his face showed everything: the shame, the pride, the long-carried wound. "You were never supposed to find those," he said. "But I did," she replied, "and now you will tell me the rest." He stepped inside and closed the door. The fire crackled. The silence stretched between them like a wire. "I was the second son," he said. "I was never meant to be the Duke, but my brother died and the title fell to me. Before that, your father and mine had drawn up a contract. I did not know of it until after it was broken. Your father refused me. He refused my family. He chose to drown himself in debt rather than allow his daughter to marry a Westcott." "Because he believed you cold," Elinor said. "I was." He said it without self-pity. "I was cold and proud and angry, and when I inherited, I saw the debt your father had accumulated. I could have called it in. I could have ruined him publicly. Instead, I paid it, year after year, not out of kindness but because I wanted him to owe me. I wanted him to know that I had become the Duke he had rejected." Elinor stared at him. The man before her was not the marble Duke of the London auction. He was something rawer, more human, and it hurt to look at him. "You bought the collection because you wanted to win," she said, "even after he was dead." "Yes." The word fell between them, heavy and honest. "And now?" she asked. He crossed the room, stopping before her. In the firelight his eyes were dark and steady. "Now I do not know what I want," he said, "except that I do not want you to hate me." Elinor looked down at the letters in her hand. Then she set them aside on the table. "I do not hate you," she said, "but I have been living in a house built on old wounds and no one saw fit to tell me. You say you do not know what you want. I know what I want. I want the truth, even when it is ugly. I want to be treated as a person, not a debt. And I want to know why you look at me as if I am something you lost." He was very close now. She could see the faint line between his brows, the tension in his jaw. He smelled of wood smoke and cold air and the faint spice of his shaving soap. "Because I did lose you," he said, "before I ever had the chance to know you." The fire snapped. Somewhere above them, the old house settled with a low groan. Elinor did not move. Neither did he. The distance between them felt like a door neither knew how to open. Then into the silence, a knock. Mrs. Thorne's voice, sharp with alarm. "Your Grace, there is a carriage approaching. Lady Caroline Wrexham has returned and she has brought the Bishop of Lindfield." The Duke's expression closed like a shutter. He stepped back. "You should go to your room," he said. "Why?" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Because Caroline does not return without a purpose, and the bishop is her uncle. Whatever she intends, it will be aimed at you." Part 6. Elinor stood in the shadows of the upper corridor, listening to the voices below. She could make out Lady Caroline's cool, practiced tones and the deeper, oily voice of the Bishop of Lindfield. They spoke of morality, of reputation, of the unsuitability of a young woman living alone in the household of an unmarried duke. "It is an outrage," the bishop said. "A scandal in the making. The church will not stand by." The duke's voice, when it came, was low and dangerous. "The arrangement is one of employment, nothing more." "Nothing more," Lady Caroline laughed. "Then you will not object to a public inquiry, an affidavit from your staff, a statement from Miss Vane herself. Let the world decide if a woman of no fortune, living under a duke's roof, is merely an archivist or something far more convenient." Elinor's fingers curled around the banister. Her heart beat a hot, furious rhythm. She had heard enough. She descended the stairs with her head high, her skirts whispering against the stone. When she entered the drawing room, 3 pairs of eyes turned to her. Lady Caroline smiled. "Miss Vane, how kind of you to join us." "I do not join you," Elinor said. "I came to answer the charges you have brought into this house." The bishop regarded her with practiced sorrow. "My child, no one wishes to accuse you, but the appearance of impropriety is itself a sin. If you have any care for your soul, you will leave this place and seek shelter with relatives or a respectable institution." "I have no relatives," Elinor said, "and I will not be sent to an institution as if I were a criminal. I have done nothing wrong, and I will not be shamed into leaving because A woman who wishes to marry the Duke finds me inconvenient." Lady Caroline's smile vanished. "You are the inconvenience, Miss Vane. You are the bought woman at the edge of every conversation. Your presence here taints the Duke's name. If you had any feeling for him, you would go." The Duke stepped forward. "Enough." But Elinor raised a hand. "No, let her speak. Let her say exactly what she means." Lady Caroline drew herself up. "I mean that you are a debt carried over from a dead man. You are a transaction. You are the £70,000 the Duke paid for the Vane collection, and everyone knows it. You have no place in this house, and you have no place in his life. If you were a woman of honor, you would already be gone." The room was utterly still. Elinor felt each word like a stone dropped into deep water. She waited until the ripples settled. "You are right about one thing," she said quietly. "I am the daughter of a man who left debts. I am not ashamed of that. My father was weak, but he was also brilliant, and he loved me. He made mistakes. One of them was trusting people like you, Lady Caroline, who smile and curtsy, and then drive a blade between the ribs when no one is watching." She turned to the bishop. "Your Grace has said nothing of my actual work, my actual conduct, my actual character. You have spoken only of appearances. That is the language of cowards. If you wish to bring charges, do so. I will stand before any court you choose and speak the truth. But I will not leave Blackwood Hall because you have decided my presence is inconvenient to your niece's ambitions." She turned to the Duke. He was watching her with an expression she could not name. "I will leave," she said, "if you ask me to, but I will not be driven out by whispers." For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then he turned to Lady Caroline and the bishop. "You will both leave this house within the hour," he said. "And if you speak one word against Miss Vane in public or in private, I will see you ruined. Do not test me." The bishop spluttered. Lady Caroline's face went white. But they left. The door closed behind them with a sound like a final breath. Elinor did not move. The Duke stood across the room, his hands at his sides, his chest rising and falling as if he had run a great distance. "You should not have come down," he said. "I had to," she replied. "This is my life. I will not hide while others decide it for me." He crossed the room slowly, stopping a few feet away. In the firelight, his face was worn and open in a way she had never seen. "I was so determined to be cold," he said. "I thought if I could control everything, the debt, the estate, the past, I would never be hurt again. My brother's death should have freed me, but it only gave me more to carry. And then you came, and I did not know what to do with you." "You did not have to do anything," she said. "I know," he said. "That is the terrible part. You asked for nothing, you expected nothing, and still I could not stop thinking about you." She looked at him, and for the first time she allowed herself to see what had been in front of her all along. The loneliness behind the title, the longing beneath the cold. The man who had settled her father's debts year after year, not because he was generous, but because he could not let go. "Why did you really bring me here?" she asked. He hesitated. Then, quietly, "Because your father asked me to, and because I wanted to see if you were still the girl I had once imagined marrying." Her breath caught. "And am I?" He looked at her with something like despair. "You are nothing like I imagined. You are so much more difficult, so much more proud, so much more alive." She stepped toward him. It was only a small movement, but it felt like stepping off the edge of a cliff. "I did not come here to fall in love with you," she said. "I came here to survive." "And now," he whispered. She did not answer. Instead, she reached up, touched his cheek with her fingertips, and then, very gently, she kissed him. The fire crackled. The house held its breath. And James Westcott, the Duke of Hartmore, who had not been touched with tenderness in years, closed his eyes and let himself be found. Part 7. The kiss broke like a wave, leaving them both unsteady. Elinor drew back first, her pulse a wild drum. The Duke stood as if rooted to the floor, one hand raised as though to touch where her lips had been. But before either could speak, the truth of the moment settled over them. Lady Caroline would not stay silent. The bishop would not stay silent. The ton would not stay silent. They had only hours before the scandal machine began to grind. "I will not let them destroy you," the Duke said. "I am not afraid of them," Elinor replied. "Then do not leave," he said. The words came out rough, almost desperate. "Do not leave, Elinor, not tonight, not ever." She looked at him for a long, searching moment. "If I stay, it must be because I choose to, not because I owe you, not because your honor demands it, because I want to." "Is that what you want?" he asked. She walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The night sky was clear, studded with stars, and the garden lay silver under the moon. Somewhere in the distance, a fox cried out, sharp and wild. "I did not think I would ever have a choice," she said. "When my father died, I thought my life was over. Not my body, but my future. I would become a governess or a companion or a charity case. I would be pitied and politely ignored. And then you came, and you offered me a year of work, and I hated you for it because it was not what I had dreamed of." She turned to face him. "But it was a choice. You gave me a choice, even if you did not mean to, and I have spent these months learning who I am without my father's name, without a fortune, without anyone to protect me. I have learned that I am strong, that I am capable, that I can stand in a room full of people who despise me and not fall." "You are the strongest person I have ever known," he said. "Then trust me now," she said. "Do not fight my battles as if I were helpless. Do not duel Lady Caroline or ruin the bishop. Let them talk. Their words will fade. But if we build a life on secrets and fear, it will not survive the first winter." He stared at her. Then slowly, a smile touched his mouth, a small, wondering expression that made him look like a different man. "You are asking me to be patient," he said. "I am asking you to be honest," she replied, "with me and with yourself." He crossed the room and took her hands in his. His fingers were warm and surprisingly gentle. "Then hear this truth, Elinor. I have loved you since the moment you walked into my breakfast room and told me I had purchased you like a parcel of land. I have loved your courage, your dignity, your impossible pride. I have loved the way you touch old books as if they were living things. I have loved you, and I have feared you, because you are the only person who has ever made me want to be less than the Duke and more than myself." Her eyes burned. She did not look away. "I am not an easy woman to love." "I do not want easy," he said. "I have had easy all my life. I want you." She stood there, her hands in his, the house silent around them, and she understood with sudden clarity that this was the moment she had been waiting for, not because he had declared himself, but because she believed him. "Then I will stay," she said, "not as your archivist, not as the daughter of a debtor, as myself, Elinor Vane, who chooses you." He pulled her close, and for the second time she kissed him. This kiss was different. It was not tentative, not uncertain. It was a promise. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small chapel at Blackwood Hall. There were no crowds, no titled guests, no spectacle. Only Mrs. Thorne, 2 maids, the old steward from the Vane estate, and a minister who asked few questions. Elinor wore a gown of deep blue silk, the color of the first dress she had worn in London. The Duke wore black and silver, but his face was soft, his eyes bright with an emotion he did not try to hide. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, the Duke raised her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. "I bought you for £70,000, he murmured. "But you are worth 100 times that, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it." Elinor smiled. "I kissed you first," she said. "Remember that." He laughed, a warm, unguarded sound, and the small chapel seemed to brighten. They walked out into the spring morning, the air fresh with the scent of rain and new leaves. The walled garden, overgrown for years, was showing its first roses. They stopped at the gate, looking out over the fields that rolled away toward the river. "What now?" she asked. He took her hand. "Now we build something," he said. "Not a debt, not a transaction, a life." And so they did. In the years that followed, the Duke of Hartmore became known not as the coldest peer in the county, but as the most devoted husband, the most attentive steward, the man who walked with his wife through the village every Sunday and knew every tenant by name. The library, once a monument to debt and pride, became the heart of the house, filled with children's laughter and the warm scent of beeswax and roses. Elinor never forgot the auction, the cold morning carriage ride, the whispers of the ton, but she had learned that the past was only a ledger, and ledgers could be rewritten. She had been bought for £70,000, but in the end she had chosen freely, and that choice had set them both free.